Welcome back to the Tool World Podcast. I'm your host, David Ju, and I'm here with Master Ju.
How's it going there, Mr. Ju?
It's going okay.
Nice.
So this week we are working a lot on step sparring.
Your favorite topic?
My favorite topic.
Everyone's favorite topic,
I know.
actually.
But you do have to do step sparring. As much as some people don't want to do step sparring, as much as it's not the most interesting part of Taekwondo, there are a lot of reasons why we want to do step sparring. And we want to kind of go through the progression of sparring in general and the 6 different types of step sparring that we have. So why don't we start there?
Sounds
what are the
good.
6 different types of sparring that we have?
Yeah, so sometimes we ask students, what are the different types of sparring? And a lot of times you get, 3-step sparring, 2-step sparring, 1-step sparring. Well, yes and no, because actually that is grouped as prearranged sparring. And then you have semi-free sparring, and then you have free sparring, and then you have model sparring, you have foot sparring, and you have prearranged free sparring. So what are they? So when we talk about prearranged free sparring, that's really a 3-step sparring, 2-step sparring, and 1-step sparring. And so what is the goal there? I think that what is the goals of those prearranged sparring versus just jumping right into free sparring? Well, it's a progression of learning. You get someone that's brand new and you ask them to kick and punch someone. I don't really want to spar someone that's brand new because you don't really know how much control they have, whether they're going to be too far away or whether they actually hit you too hard. Mm-hmm. So whenever I spar someone that's brand new, I always have to treat it like I better be prepared because you don't know what's going to come at you, right? And so when we look at step sparring, that really kind of teaches a lot about distance, how techniques come at you.
Well, let's take a look at semi-free sparring. So semi-free sparring is the next in the progression, and it's supposed to kind of mimic free sparring because it's just trading, right?
Trading
and so,
techniques.
yeah, what's the goal of that?
Well, I think we're transitioning now from a preset of group of sparring, right? 3-step sparring, you know you got 3 punches coming at you, or 2-step sparring, you know you got 2 attacks coming at you. 1-step sparring is just 1 attack and how you respond to that. And I think that the semi-free sparring is really kind of gearing you up towards that free sparring, where a lot of times actually you see white belts do that. When you throw them in and do sparring, they throw a technique, they block, and then they kind of move back. They don't engage. They only do 1 technique at a time. Kick, block, and that's kind of where semi-free sparring kind of comes in. It teaches us a little bit distance. The speed work might be a little bit faster, moving left and right, although you do learn some of that in the step sparring as well.
The great thing about semi-free sparring is it also does keep it very controlled.
Right, you're limited to a number of attacks.
You're limited to 1 attack. And that's really important for the students because there's not too much pressure coming on them, right? You might have a student that's a little bit more aggressive for another student, right? And so doing the 1 attack really dials it down.
Absolutely. And just the other day, I had a parent come up to me and ask me, how do you defend against someone throwing multiple punches at my kid's face? I says, experience. But yeah, absolutely. It's more controlled when you do the 1 at a time. And then we move into that free sparring.
Right.
And we should really clarify that. I think we should call that really tournament free sparring, because when we talk about free sparring, we have rules. You can't kick below the belt. You can't kick the back. You can't grab them. You can't bite them. So is that free sparring? Well, yes, it's more like a tournament free sparring.
Well, so there's not much to say about free sparring because I think most people that do listen to this podcast probably
have done it,
or they have their students do it. So that might be a topic for another day about just sparring in general. But let's kind of move on here. And actually one of the questions is like, when is the right time to do free sparring? And has it changed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in my opinion, there is a progression. So we have 3-step sparring basically for white belts through about yellow belts, green belts, to blue belts are doing 2-step sparring, and blue belts and above up to black belt, or even before, even after that, is 1-step sparring. There is a reason for it, right? 3-step sparring, again, I think is teaching us about distance. 2-step sparring is also teaching us about distance and having to deal with different types of techniques. It's not just 3 same punches or 3 same kicks, but it could be a kick and a punch. And so you have to deal with that. And one-step sparring, as I recall, General Che was saying that, you know, the most important sparring really is 3-step sparring and 1-step sparring. So why 3-step sparring? Because it's the fundamentals. It's teaching us how to move with somebody. The 1-step sparring, as he was saying, is that really it's kind of like an attack. If you're on the street and someone throws a punch, how do you respond to that? We don't really go into free sparring, or we don't go into the guarding position expecting to fight somebody all the time. It's that sometimes we have attacks coming at you and you have to be able to respond to that. And so in that way, it is kind of like self-defense in that perspective.
So is it wrong to have, let's say, a white belt and they want to do free sparring and they have the gear? Is that allowed, not allowed?
Well, in America, we allow it. I'm not sure. I think a lot of times, probably around the world, probably everyone's kind of doing it. I'm not 100% sure. But you do see like competition, and you see white belts and yellow belts do it. And I think it's okay, but you've got to be really careful as far as control. You have to have a good umpire. You have to have good coaches, and making sure that it's safe and what they can and cannot do. They may not be ready to really be able to defend themselves, even though it's sparring and it's only about points and it's only about light touch, but things go stray sometimes. And so having a black belt in competition, fighting a white belt, well, obviously you would kind of expect that black belt to be a lot better, right? However, maybe in class, giving them a little bit more excitement and maybe having a high rank help out the lower rank. But that also is a skill set as well. You're having higher ranks that haven't really helped other people, and all they think about is, let me just hit this kid or hit this student.
Right.
So then you've got other issues there as well. But I think traditionally, I would say go through these progressions.
Yeah.
But does that mean that should a white belt not learn how to do kodang or jute or mu? Well, they can try.
Yeah.
But obviously they have to learn a lot of skill sets in order to be able to do that. Do they mimic that? They could, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I think sparring's the same way.
Right. All right, so let's jump forward to some of the higher, a little bit more advanced kind of sparrings that we have. And the next one would be model sparring.
Model sparring, more like a demonstration, I think. It's more like a one-step sparring where you're demonstrating the technique in full speed, and then you slow it down to show off what you just did. And so that's more of a demonstration than anything else.
Right.
And what's the next one?
We got foot sparring.
Foot sparring.
And so that one takes us back to the original Korean martial art, right?
Taekyon.
Taekyon,
right. That one's kind of hard to do. You have to practice a lot of that.
Yeah.
And we do it in the format of like a semi-free sparring. So one technique at a time. Right. You got to block with your foot, attack with your foot. And so there's no hands involved here. Right. You can dodge. And that's actually not a bad skill to have. It's easier for us to use our hands than it is to kick or block kicks or use our legs to block. And that's I think one of the advantages of Taekwondo. We're working on things that are a little bit more difficult. I mean, everyone can really punch, but when it comes to kicking, that might be a little bit more difficult.
Right. All right, now lastly, we have pre-arranged free sparring, and what would that be?
I kind of think of it like the movies. You have it all scripted out.
Right.
It's all for show, showing different techniques. Looks like a movie, like you're in a fight scene. That's how I look at it.
Now, the interesting thing I think about these kind of step sparring is that it's a great opportunity to show the application of the techniques, and really get to see firsthand how it might work, right? And so when you're doing stuff like 3-step sparring, it's going to be very basic. It might be 3 punches, and how do I block those? Exactly. But when we look at like pre-arranged free sparring, now you can look at other things like checking block with the X knife hand, right? Or how you defend against a reverse turning kick in a controlled manner.
Or someone gives you a bear hug.
Or someone gives you a bear hug, right?